the Seductress. It was supposed to be an adventure, a chance to get away from the stifling city and experience something new before they all went their separate ways after graduation. The 6 friends, Mike, Jenna, Brad, Lisa, Alex, and Samantha, loaded up Mike's old SUV and headed into the mountains, following a winding road until they came across a tiny village nestled between towering peaks. "This is it, Drakavich," Mike announced, squinting at the creased map on his lap. "Doesn't look like much." "That's kind of the point, isn't it?" Jenna said from the passenger seat, brushing her red hair behind her ear. "To get away from it all?" The village consisted of a scattered cluster of rustic cottages and farmhouses, centered around a small stone church with a bell tower. As they drove the single dirt road that comprised Drakavich's main street, curtains fluttered in windows as curious faces peered out at the unfamiliar vehicle. "Friendly locals," Brad muttered. They pulled up in front of a weathered inn with a wooden sign hanging above the door that read, "Raven's Rest," in curling letters. A heavy-set woman with frizzy grey hair pulled into a bun emerged, sweeping the stoop with a raggedy broom. "You lot must be from out of town," she said in a thick accent as they climbed out of the SUV, stretching their legs. "We don't get many visitors up here." "Just looking for a few nights away from the city," Mike said with an easy smile. "Got any rooms?" The innkeeper's beady eyes flicked over each of them, her brow furrowed. "Well, I suppose I can put you up, but you'd best be minding your manners while you're here. Things are different in Drakavich." "Different how?" Samantha couldn't help but ask, shivering slightly despite the warm afternoon sun beating down on them. The old woman's mouth tightened into a thin line. "You'll see soon enough, I expect." She turned and gestured for them to follow her inside. After getting settled into their adjoining rooms, the group ventured back outside to explore the tiny village. Many of the buildings showed signs of disrepair, with sagging roofs and cracked windows. There wasn't a single car or any modern technology to be seen, aside from a few buzzing fluorescent lights. Chickens and goats wandered the dusty streets freely. As the sun began to sink below the jagged peaks rimming Drakavich, the villagers started emerging from their homes. They cast wary looks at the newcomers as they went about their evening routines, hanging laundry, tending small garden plots, repairing tools and farm equipment by hand. More than one of them made the sign of the cross and muttered something unintelligible when they caught sight of the friends. "Okay, I'm officially creeped out," Lisa whispered, as a bearded man dressed in rough wool robes shuffled past, head bowed as he worked a string of beads through his gnarled fingers. "This place is like a freaking time warp." "I don't know. I kind of dig the old world vibe," Brad said with a grin, slinging his arm around Lisa's shoulders. "No cell signal, no social media, no distractions." "Looks like the distractions are going to find us," Jenna murmured. Up ahead, a small group of young women had emerged from one of the run-down houses, baskets of laundry looped over their arms. Despite their modest, antiquated dress, long skirts and high-necked blouses, it was obvious they were close to the friend's age, perhaps a few years younger. Their bright eyes and unblemished skin stood out from the worn, weathered locals. The girls watched with undisguised fascination as the strangers passed by. One girl with olive skin and raven hair that spilled over her shoulders fell back from her friends, shifting her laundry basket to her hip as she openly stared at Alex. She went so far as to drop her gaze slowly up and down his tall, athletic frame in a way that made Alex's cheeks burn. "Well, hello," the girl purred in a voice much deeper and more sultry than one would have expected. Her dark eyes smouldered from beneath heavy lids as she drank Alex in. Hi," Alex stammered, unable to tear his gaze away from her high cheekbones, perfect Cupid's bow lips, and the golden hoops that glinted in her ears, small but unmistakable signs of rebellion against the village's oppressive dress code. An errant lock of hair spilled across her forehead, only adding to her tantalizing beauty. "Leaving so soon?" the girl cooed when the rest of the group started to move on, shifting her weight so her hips swayed hypnotically. "What's your hurry, handsome?" "Easy there, Lothario," Brad cut in with a barking laugh. He crooked his arm around Alex's neck in a playful headlock, dragging him away. "Keep it in your pants, stud." The raven-haired girl's smile only seemed to widen at Brad's antics until her full lips stretched into an almost predatory grin, revealing a hint of straight, white teeth. Her smouldering gaze tracked Alex until they rounded a corner, and she disappeared from view. "Looks like someone caught the eye of the village beauty," Samantha teased, elbowing Alex's ribs. "Cut it out, you guys," Alex grumbled, flushing furiously all the way up to the tips of his ears. By the time the sun had fully set, the streets had emptied once more, not a villager in sight. The friends hovered outside the inn's entrance, unsure whether to venture out into the gloom-shrouded lanes. Yellow light from the inn's windows spilled out onto the dusty stoop and cast dancing shadows over the rough stone facade of the church across the way. "This place is seriously giving me the creeps at night," Lisa muttered, hugging her arms as a cool wind gusted through the village. "Oh, don't be such a—" Brad began before a flicker of movement at the corner of the church drew his attention. It was the raven-haired girl, slipping from the shadows to stand framed in the pool of light cast by the inn's windows. She wore the same high-necked blouse and long skirt from earlier, but her midnight tresses were now loose, tumbling in inky waves past her shoulders. She stood utterly motionless, piercing eyes fixed unblinkingly on Alex. You guys?" Alex puffed out an uneasy breath, frozen beneath the girl's penetrating stare. "Is it just me, or is Bible thumper Barbie over there acting a little weird?" As if in response, the girl began walking towards them with a predatory grace, hips swaying sinuously beneath her skirt with every step. A shiver raced up Alex's spine, and the tiny hairs on the back of his neck stood on end, even though the girl's full lips curved into a warm, inviting smile. "Okay, I'm ready to go inside now," Samantha said in a hushed voice. She clutched Mike's arm tightly as Jenna, Brad and Lisa shrank back towards the inn's entrance. But Alex remained rooted in place, unable, or unwilling, to pull his gaze away from the entrancing figure gliding ever closer across the deserted lane. "Don't you want to stay out here with me?" the girl breathed, stopping barely more than a foot away from Alex, her scent, a heady blend of honeysuckle and spice, wafting over him. Up close, he could see flecks of gold spinning within the depths of her dark irises, the elegant curve of her neck disappearing into the shadow of her blouse's high collar. She reached out with one slim hand and trailed her fingertips along Alex's jawline in a feather-light caress that shot electric sparks through his veins. "We could have so much fun together." "Alex! Snap out of it, man," Mike hissed, grabbing his friend's arm in an attempt to pull him back towards the inn. But Alex recoiled from Mike's touch instinctively, like a horse shying away from a threat. No, it's cool," he protested, still transfixed on the captivating girl before him. "She's, hot." The girl gave a husky laugh that might have been attractive coming from someone else, but sent icy tendrils of dread lashing through the others. "See? Your friend knows what he wants." She leaned in closer until her lips were a hair's breadth away from Alex's, her intoxicating aura enveloping him completely. This close, he could make out faint freckles dusting the bridge of her straight nose, the tantalizing curves of her body just barely concealed beneath the flowing material of her skirt. A few stray wisps of her hair tickled his cheek. "Just one little kiss, and you'll be mine forever," she whispered, sweet breath fanning warmly across his face. Alex felt himself leaning in helplessly, enthralled. But just before their lips could meet, Jenna shouldered past the others, seized Alex by the shoulders, and wrenched him backwards with all her might. "Get away from him, you psycho bitch!" Jenna yelled, shoving herself between Alex and the girl while keeping an iron grip on his arm. The raven-haired beauty's entrancing aura shattered like a soap bubble, her pretty features contorted into an inhumanly grotesque mask of rage, eyes burning with emerald fire. A guttural snarl ripped from her throat, revealing a mouthful of jagged fangs that certainly weren't human. The friends recoiled in shock and horror, stumbling over themselves as they scrambled back towards the relative safety of the inn's entrance. "Unholy deceiver!" bellowed a commanding voice from behind them. Father Zdenek, the elderly priest Alex had glimpsed through the window of the tiny stone chapel, charged from the shadows brandishing an ornate silver crucifix like a sword. His robes billowed around him as he planted himself in front of the cowering group of friends, crucifix extended towards the slavering beast that moments ago had appeared as an alluring young woman. "Begone from this place, demonic harlot!" the old priest commanded in a voice that boomed with unexpected power. The creature hissed furiously and raked its talons against the ground, leaving deep gouges in the packed earth. Its sinewy body seemed to elongate and stretch, shedding its feminine curves and delicate features in favour of a sleeker, more predatory form. Skin flushed emerald, sprouting coarse fur that rippled with each rolling spasm. The creature was changing into something else, its true monstrous self emerging from the deceptively beautiful shell. And then it spoke in a gurgling rasp that sent icy daggers of dread piercing into each of them. "You cannot stop me, foolish man, not while the hunger burns within this village." With a wailing screech that set their teeth on edge, the beast turned and fled in a bounding, loping gait that cleared the ground inhumanly fast, soon disappearing between the crumbling shells of vacant cottages. Father Zdenek remained facing the direction the creature had gone, crucifix gripped white-knuckled and held high, as if ready to fend off another attack at any moment. When he finally did turn back towards the friends, his craggy features were grave beneath his shock of snowy hair. "You must come inside quickly now," he urged, gesturing them through the inn's arched front doors, before following and bolting them securely behind him. The innkeeper and a few other straggling villagers gaped at them from the dimly lit common room, cowering back as Father Zdenek swept past towards a crackling fire in the hearth. He took an iron poker and stoked the glowing coals, dislodging sparks and fanning the flames higher. "Easy with the hardware, Padre," Brad joked weakly, attempting to regain his bravado even as his legs still trembled. "We're not Girl Scouts, but we're not vampire slayers either." The old priest rounded on them, shadows from the firelight dancing over his hawkish features and giving his pale eyes a manic intensity. "Make no mistake, your lives are in grave peril as long as you remain here. That was no vampire haunting the streets tonight. What you encountered was something far older and far more ravenous." The friends gaped at Father Zdenek, their earlier unease morphing into full-blown dread as the weight of his ominous words sank in. Jenna was the first to find her voice. What the hell was that thing, and what did it mean about a hunger burning in this village? The old priest settled himself into a battered armchair, the firelight flickering over his deeply lined face and giving his pale eyes a haunted look. He clutched his silver crucifix tightly in one gnarled hand. "To understand the darkness that plagues Drakavich," he began in a low, somber tone, "you must first know of this village's damned history. May God have mercy on our souls. You see, we are not the first inhabitants of this forsaken valley." He described how the remote mountain village was built nearly a millennium ago atop the ruins of an ancient pagan settlement. According to the historic record, the original townsfolk had participated in vile rituals and unholy rites that drew the attention and ire of the medieval church. An army of crusaders and priests were assembled to confront the heathens. But when the holy men reached the valley, they found the entire population had been devoured. Not a single man, woman, or child remained, only the scattered remnants of their homes and belongings amidst gruesome piles of desiccated bones picked clean. The most disturbing relics, however, were the evidence that a great evil still lurked in that valley, Father Zdenek continued, his deep timbre taking on a haunted quality. Blasphemous idols and profane symbols marked every inch of those ruins in blood and remains. It was clear to the priests whatever ravenous entity the pagans worshipped had turned upon its followers and feasted. Despite the dancing firelight and thick stone walls surrounding them, a chill seemed to descend over the room. The friends sat in uneasy silence, casting furtive glances at the bolted doors and shuttered windows, as if half expecting to see the emerald beast's glowing eyes peering in at them. "So, what was it?" Alex finally asked, swallowing hard. "Demon? Vampire? What could do something like that?" Father Zdenek leaned forward, the crucifix swinging from his grasp to catch the firelight and cast a wavering, elongated shadow across the floor. According to the ancient texts, it was a succubus. Samantha sucked in a sharp breath. "You mean like a sex demon?" The old priest nodded slowly. "A sex demon of immense power, desire made flesh. Unlike the fanciful depictions in song and story, the succubus is no mere temptress of physical pleasure and lust. It preys upon far darker longings within the human psyche, the thirst for domination, the hunger for depravity and corruption of the soul. It feeds upon its victims' fears, insecurities, and repressed shadows, until all that remains is an empty, shriveled human husk." Lisa made a small whimpering sound, and Brad instinctively draped his arm over her shoulders, pulling her close. But the small comfort of that human contact was overshadowed by Father Zdenek's next words. "And if the succubus remains in this world for too long, cut off from the infernal realm that spawned it, it grows perpetually hungrier." The implications of that statement settled over the room like a suffocating blanket. Mike was the first to put that mounting dread into words. "So you're saying, whatever sick freak those pagan wackos were worshipping, it's still out there?" The priest fixed Mike with an unwavering stare and gave the slightest nod. "And Drakavich was built atop the site of its ancient killing grounds. The cycle of violence that began here so many centuries ago was never truly broken, only contained for a time with rituals and wards." He held the crucifix aloft, its edges glinting razor-sharp in the firelight. "This humble village stands as the final line of defense against this unholy evil awakening once more to feast upon the darkness harbored in every human heart." The crackle of burning logs and snapping embers was the only sound for a long, dreadful moment, as the old man's words burrowed into their bones like icy tendrils. Then Brad let out a nervous chuckle that surprised even him. "So you're saying that literal thirst trap is out there, waiting to kill us by making us act on our sickest thoughts? Well, shit. Then we're in big trouble." No one joined his forced laughter, too rattled by the gravity of the situation. Father Zdenek fixed Brad with a solemn look. "Make no mistake, young man. The battle we find ourselves embroiled in now is not one of mere flesh and bone. The creature thrives by exploiting the corruption poisoning one's soul, until it can lure its prey into committing acts of such wretched depravity that their spirit is forever tainted, and thus a worthy vessel for the succubus to inhabit before shedding the hollowed husk." Fear pulsed thick in the air like a living force. Samantha clutched Mike's hand so hard her knuckles turned bloodless. What are we supposed to do?" The flames danced and sparked as if feeding on their mounting dread. Father Zdenek rose slowly to his feet, crucifix dangling from his fingertips. His lined face was etched in grim resignation. "I had hoped this evil could be contained here in the valley until the next generation of priests could be trained to relieve me of this burden. But it seems the demonic whore has grown too ravenous, too impatient. He braced his shoulders and turned to face the friends directly. You must leave this village before the succubus can ensnare you in its coils, this very night before it grows any stronger. Once it marks you, no sanctum will shield you from its corruption. The finality in his tone seemed to suck the air from the room. Then Jenna spoke up, her voice scarcely above a trembling whisper. But you can't stay here alone against that thing. Father Zdenek's pale eyes softened for the briefest of moments before re-hardening with grim resolve. This has been my calling, my penance, for the past 60 years. Since I was deemed spiritually unfit for the priesthood as a young man, but allowed to serve here in Drakavich to commune with the Lord and atone through isolation. His gaze lowered to the crucifix, weathered metal flashing like liquid silver in the light. I was not meant to win this holy war, only keep the beast caged until those with the true faith could release me from this mortal coil. Now it has fallen to you. A heavy silence descended over the common room, the weight of Father Zdenek's pronouncement pressing down like a suffocating shroud. The old priest's words hung in the air, undeniable, a death sentence cloaked in solemn acceptance of his doomed role as gatekeeper against the ancient evil. Mike was the first to find his voice, the waver in it barely perceptible to anyone but those closest to him. You're saying we have to kill this thing? The howling mountain winds seemed to rise up in response, whistling through unseen cracks and buffeting the inn's sturdy walls, as if the succubus itself was railing against being unmasked and challenged. Father Zdenek's expression remained unshaken, eyes glinting with a zeal born of unshakable faith rather than fear. To destroy such an abomination will require more than mere mortal strength of arms. The archfiend's power over the human psyche remains its deadliest weapon. Slaying it depends solely upon the purity of your souls, your ability to repel the insidious temptations it will use to unearth your most depraved shadows and deepest, darkest cravings. Another howling gust rattled the shuttered windows with startling force. Lisa shrank back against Brad with a frightened whimper, her eyes wide and glistening. "I don't understand," she breathed, trembling. "How can we possibly fight something like that? We're not warriors or exorcists or whatever." The old priest gave her a look of surprising tenderness, edged with the faintest hint of pity. All human souls bear the capacity for both light and shadow, love and hatred, creation and destruction. Too often the scales tip toward the darkness not from any overtly evil impulse, but from those subtle yearnings we repress, greed, wrath, envy, vices allowed to fester and corrupt from within. He spread his arms wide, the tarnished silver crucifix swinging heavily from his hand. The demon merely stokes the flames of those cancers already riddling your spirit until they erupt and ravage you completely. To defeat it requires laying bare your very souls, rooting out the wickedness poisoning you from within, and defiantly denying the profane temptations it uses to corrode your humanity. Oppressive silence fell over the room once more, as his solemn declaration hung in the air. At last, Alex spoke up, his voice hollow. "So we either manage to purify ourselves and send this sexed-up devil packing, or it twists us into our own personal sick freaks and kills us." Father Zdenek held his gaze steadily for a silent moment before giving a single grave nod. Brad sank back further into his chair with a humorless chuckle, dragging a hand over his closely cropped hair. "Well then, we're completely fucked. We're just normal shitty people like everyone else." "Perhaps," the old priest acknowledged with a faint smile that held no joy, only resignation. "But then again, I have known far too many to give in to the temptations of their inner demons when staring into the abyss of their flawed mortality. He turned his watery pale eyes to regard each of them in turn, flicking briefly to Alex when he spoke again. And I have witnessed others, even those plagued by doubt, find the courage to defy the boundaries of their limitations and rise to become unexpected beacons of light in the encroaching darkness. The choice is yours to make. The tension stretched taut as a bowstring, fraught with the weight of that pivotal crossroads looming before them. Jenna finally broke the silence in a small, quavering voice. How do we even start? Father Zdenek began walking towards the heavy oak doors, the light of the crackling fire gilding his stark silhouette and casting his shadow ahead in a dancing, wavering mass that seemed to swallow him up with each shuffling step. He halted with one gnarled hand outstretched towards the iron bolt, hanging his head as if listening to unheard whispers surrounding them. When he spoke again, his words were tinged with finality and acceptance. You make your stand here, in these hallowed halls where I have confined the beast for my lifetime. I shall keep it occupied while you flee to safety and gather allies to unmask the succubus's weakness. He levelled his fiercest stare at each of them again before pulling the bolt free. As you put distance between yourselves and this unholy place, you must make an accounting of the sins and depraved impulses lurking within you, for they will be the keys this abomination uses to tempt you. Only by laying bare your souls to each other and accepting the light and darkness there without reservation do you stand any hope of repelling its hold. The door creaked open ponderously, unleashing a howling gale from outside that seemed to shriek with inhuman fury and rage. None of the friends moved as the old priest braced himself to face the maelstrom beyond, tattered robe whipping in the torrent. Across his robed back seemed to flicker the outline of immense wings, whether a trick of the firelight and whirling snow or a glimpse of something more, they couldn't be certain. Father Zdenek angled his head one final time, crucifix gleaming in the shifting radiance. It is time. The true battle for the sanctity of your souls begins now. Without another word, he stepped over the threshold and into the vortex of screaming winds swirling madly outside. The door slammed shut behind him, leaving the 6 friends alone in the flickering half-light, shaken to their core by the ominous gauntlet laid before them. So, who wants to go first with their darkest secrets and horrifying turn-ons? Brad said in a rasping attempt at levity that rang hollowly through the room. None of them laughed.